Hello again, everybody. I'm Dean O'Neill.
And I'm Nick Robinson.
Nick, how are you today?
I am good. We just had a really fun back-to-school Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah,
yes,
we had
it was.
kids on platforms. We had kids helping lead in both. In the first service, there's more opportunities for kids to help lead because there's just more things to do. So we had kids acolyting. We had kids reading scripture, serving communion. Second service, we had kids just serving communion because there's just not as much for them to do.
Right.
And it was great. We had good numbers of kids in both services. We blessed them. We gave them keychains to put on their backpacks. My kids got their keychains on their backpacks all ready to go to school. We prayed for them. We prayed for all the people who are going to be investing in our kids' lives this school year. And it was good.
The sermon was great too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It was. If you weren't in church, I used my kids as an example. I brought them on the platform, and I twisted and I turned them, and just kind of like because it was about how did Jesus pick up these kids, and so I used my kids. And a couple of things about that. One, in second service, I heard someone say, "That's his kid," and I'm like, "Oh, some people may not know that these are my kids," and they might. Why is that pastor twirling those kids around? Oh, they're my kids. Don't worry, they're my kids. And then the second thing was. I love being able to interact with my kids that way in the sermon. Ada was so self-conscious afterwards because people laughed. And I'm like, honey, that's okay. We were being silly.
Yeah.
And we expected people to laugh. But, she's almost 6. She's 5 still.
Sure.
And she just said, I don't like when anybody laughs near me. And I was just like, oh, girl, it'll be okay. She's just working out those feelings still.
Well, that'll all come about.
Yeah.
So today's podcast, Jesus is back.
Jesus is back. That's because we have gone back.
There you go.
During all of this year, 9 months or so of reading the New Testament, I had this schedule. I remember read a chapter 2, 3 chapters a day sometimes, and trying to fit the themes of the sermons and everything. And so there were just some chapters in some of the Gospels especially that we didn't read.
Right.
Not for any particular reason other than they just didn't fit with the rest of the agenda.
Sure.
And so this week we're going back and we're cleaning up and we're reading all of those scriptures so that way we can have checked off every chapter of the New Testament.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So if it feels if it feels more disjointed than normal, that's part of the reason why. But the other thing is there's, I can tell that I didn't preach on the Transfiguration this year. So the Transfiguration is a special event where Jesus goes up on the hill and he turns shining bright white, and Moses and Elijah are there. Because a lot of these readings are the Transfiguration.
And to correct me if I'm wrong, the Transfiguration pretty much goes at a certain point in the year.
It does.
Correct.
Yeah. It's I believe
something.
Oh gosh, I want to say it's usually like the Sunday right before Lent starts.
Right.
And we were doing something else the Sunday right before Lent starts, and so we didn't do that because when I preach the lectionary and I follow all of the holidays, I do that sometimes, but sometimes we're just doing something else for an important reason, and so we don't get to do it.
Right. Well, and hey, you try to do something different on each subject each year that falls on each year. And just because we didn't do it, I mean, that's how much weight it had from the year before.
Yeah, well, and it's like the Transfiguration is really interesting, but I don't know how many Transfiguration sermons I have. Right. So to preach on it every single year preaching Easter every year is hard enough. Preach on the Transfiguration every year is just, I just don't have that much creativity all the time. So it's good to try something else.
All right.
Yeah, so today we're on Matthew chapter 10 and 17, and we're going to kind of focus our conversation around chapter 10 today. Because here Jesus is giving his disciples a certain amount of authority. He's telling them to go and do things, and then there's a kind of effects, warnings, directions about this authority, all kind of throughout this chapter, this conversation that Jesus is having with the people around him. So like it starts with, he called his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to throw them out and heal every sickness and disease. And then it goes on, Jesus sent the 12 out and commanded them to go certain places and do certain things, to not take certain things, but they're worth a certain amount of pay because workers are worth their wages. And there's a warning about harassments and people to fear and like troubles that will arise for people who are going out to profess Jesus, not just in the work that they're doing, but their families might even kind of have awkward relationships with them.
Sure.
And so it's like this kind of long, detailed conversation about authority.
And in a sense, Jesus is having them be leaders as opposed to he's the leader and they've been following.
Correct.
So it's a different dynamic, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so what I want us to kind of center our conversation on today is like, what authority do we have today? So in this chapter, he's commissioning 12, and he's sending out 12. In other places, he commissions and sends out 72. So there's work for disciples to do on a regular basis. And I think part of the tension or the question in the church is, who is called to do that work? I know growing up I didn't grow up in church, really. I started going to church in 8th grade, and I know when I was an adolescent in church, the pastor would preach sermons like, you need to tell people about Jesus, and you need to invite people to church. I'm like, isn't that your job, man? Like, isn't that why?
Sure.
That's not my job. That's your job. And, as a pastor now, I'm just like, well, I know so many people, but our church knows a lot more people than me. And the invitation to church means a lot more coming from somebody who knows you than from someone who's trying to recruit you because they're the pastor or whatever.
Sure.
So I don't like, Dean, when you look at the church and maybe yourself or the leaders that you've seen at Asbury and the other churches that you've been a part of, what are we really in charge of as the lay people and the leaders of churches? Like, what authority, what power do we have?
I see, honestly, the only other church that I have is obviously across the way, and there were spiritually there were 3 people at one point that basically I followed. What I did was just something that I did. I did the AV. Okay, so we just ran into it. Right before. Somebody approached me. We were talking to somebody approached me to do a video because they knew that I do the video and stuff. So I don't have much authority, and I never have. But when it comes to the final product that I put out, I make it a point to say, hey, listen, this is, if this is going to air, I want to be a part of the decision to air it. And especially if I've created it, then I want somebody to see it. I don't necessarily want somebody to change it, but I want somebody to see it to let them know what I was thinking in that matter.
Well, and often, you talked about a couple different kinds of authority here.
Yeah.
Like spiritual authority is one thing. And in churches, we often do look to the pastor as being one of the main spiritual leaders.
Yes.
We expect them to have their faith developed and to lead out of their faith. What lay people who are not the pastor can also be really effective spiritual leaders. I mean, I know growing up as an adolescent in the church, the pastor was influential over me, but my Sunday school teachers and my youth group leader had spiritual authority and had a greater influence on me. There were some teachers at school that helped lead FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, who had some real big influence over me. I had peers who had a big influence over my spirituality, maybe bigger than my youth group leader.
Sure.
And so we have authority and influence just as people. Like there's always this opportunity to influence people. And I say influence, and I just think of influencers on Instagram. Influence is everything right now.
Right. It is. I will say this. I am a product of, and you probably are too at some point in your pastoral career, but a bigger church has not bigger, but more, I don't want to say problems, but more opportunities. Let me just say that. That's the, the Six Sigma way. A smaller church, which I'm a part of now, it's more intimate and it's more trusting, I believe. And here's my example. Again, my example is 15, 20 minutes ago, I come in and I talk to someone about doing a video. I also come in to accounting and Ron's doing an awesome job sitting in and I go to Ron, I say, hey, Ron, do you need anything from me? have everything good with me, because in my department I deal with receipts and stuff like that. And he goes, no, I think you got one. And I said, okay, well, but it's not so corporate.
Yeah.
And we've said that word before and everything. Yeah. So there's some advantages and disadvantages.
That's another type of authority. So we have spiritual authority. You talked earlier too about kind of your AV work.
Yeah.
Like there's usually someone's in charge in the AV room, right?
Yeah,
and it's in charge of recruiting volunteers and training volunteers. Like that's a type of authority.
Right.
Then there's the type of authority. There's like a authority of position, like the pastor has sometimes.
Sure.
But also like this relational, more casual authority that's possible in smaller churches where you know the person keeping the books, and they're not. When I worked for a big church, there were 2 or 3 different accounting people who worked for that church.
Yeah.
And I worked in a completely different department. I was in the youth ministry, and I was part-time, and I was way down at the bottom of the totem pole. And so it's like, well, I didn't even talk to that person.
Right.
Except for I was in charge of counting the money for some of the youth events.
Right.
So I had to know some of the procedures, but it was just like, that kind of authoritarian authority versus casual relational authority.
Right. One thing I'm so against in churches, and some churches do it, is they do like Enneagrams. They make you take a test, and it's like, well, what time out? So if Jesus were here, would you give him an Enneagram?
I have some friends who are pastors who are really into the Enneagram.
Oh man.
I don't know how much they use it always in their teaching, but they love it as a tool for understanding people. And I mean, I think it's a personality test.
Right.
It can be interesting. It can be useful to a point, but it's not the end all be all for sure.
Sure. And I refused to take one. And that was the reason why. But what's funny is I refused to take one. And so my close friends said, he's an 8. So I don't.
Well, and that's what people, and they'll say like on the Enneagram, they say, well, you don't read a test. You read the descriptions, and then you decide which one you are.
Right.
And sometimes you're wrong, and someone else has to help you understand who you are. I'm just like, that just sounds made up to me, guys. That just sounds.
That's why I said when I refused to do it, because you had to redo them or something like that. And I said, I'm not doing it. So the person that wanted me to do it said, hey, come and I said, I declined to do it. So, but one thing's for certain is you can put me down as an 8 because I declined to do it. Yeah. And that's the way it was. So it's, again, the intimacy of a smaller church has its advantages. The disadvantages is we don't have a lot more people like the big churches, but the big churches have their problems too.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I love Asbury. I think it's awesome.
I do too.
And the reason I want to talk about authority today is I don't think people often think about their authority.
Right.
I don't think, oftentimes authority, we see it in conflict, people fighting over who can be in charge.
Sure.
But there are so many avenues for us to use our authority in the world, for us to use our influence, to tell about our experience. And so I want people today who are listening to think about where are you exercising your authority?
Sure.
And there's a big difference to me between Jesus-centered authority, authority that's modeled after Jesus' life, and authority that is authoritarian in nature.
Sure.
You do what I say because I tell you to say it, and all that. Versus the sacrificial, serving others kind of authority. And I don't always follow. I'm sure I don't always follow the kind of authority that I want to be known for and that I think is best and most valuable. Because sometimes the tell someone to do something thing is a lot easier, even if it's weaker over time.
Right.
Building consensus is harder, even if it's more valuable.
Sure. And authority and leadership are 2 different things. Oh. It's just the way it is. But they're also very close together.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a leader, then you have to show some authority to lead people. If you're a follower, followers need people of authority to tell them what to do,
And if there's not someone exercising authority in a healthy way, then oftentimes someone will step in and exercise authority in an unhealthy way.
Right.
And that's true in organizations. It's true in our personal lives. It's true in our families. And so we need to take seriously this idea that we have authority and that we are called and commissioned by God to use it. Maybe we don't feel like we're one of the 12 apostles. That's fine. That's reasonable. I don't feel like I'm one of the 12 apostles.
No.
I feel like I have a call to ministry, though, and so maybe I can learn some things from their call.
Sure.
But we all have the priesthood of all believers. We
Right.
talk about that still from time to time on this podcast and in our casual conversations. We all have some kind of authority given to us. And so where's yours? Dear listener, where are you finding your authority, and how are you using it?
Sure. Real quick, can we touch on 17, or did we kind of touch on both at the same time?
Well, that was pretty much 10, because 10 that's where the reflection question for today came from. 17 kind of is a transfiguration chapter.
Right. We talked about that.
And so we're going to be hitting transfiguration probably on some of these other days. So let's leave it to our next conversation.
Sounds great.
Yeah, let's close in prayer.
Sure.
God, help us to take our authority. Scripture in places says, take thou authority. So help us to take our authority and to do it in a way of having a servant's heart, of humbling ourselves the same way Jesus humbled himself, of seeking to serve others and not ourselves, of not serving, not leading, not using our authority to get ahead, but to show your love and grace to this world. God, where we are shy to take our authority, help us to find courage and help us to find the right authorities to listen to as well in the many areas of our lives. God, we ask all this in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen.
For Nick Robinson, I'm Dean O'Neill. You've been on The Daily Path.